Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this special and I think important meeting to discuss privacy. It's been, as Larry Magid said in his just recently published article, what a week this last week has been. So I think that there is much to talk about, many questions to be asked, and we welcome them. But first, I want to thank Larry Magid, the technology journalist and co-director of ConnectSafety.org, who is, I think, well known and highly regarded throughout our area. Joe Sullivan, who is the Chief Security Officer of Facebook, we welcome him and thank him. Nikki Jackson Colaco from Facebook Public Policy Online Safety. Where is Nikki? Right there, right in the front. And Annie Folger, the Executive Director of the Mid-Peninsula Community Media Center. And we especially thank them because they are recording this event for us and enabling it to go live on their community channel. And to everyone that's come to the Palo Alto City Council chambers, you are so welcome. And I want to make special mention of a special group, and that is the Student Advisory Board members of the 14th Congressional District. Welcome to you, and I look forward to your questions. Let me just make a few introductory remarks. I think that the issue of privacy is something that is really deeply embedded in the DNA of all Americans. We feel very strongly about anything that applies to us, our personal information. We have a healthy skepticism about government and Big Brother. We don't want people looking over our shoulders. We don't want people to have information that we feel belongs to us. And only under certain conditions do we, I think, willingly give permission for something to be used. On the one hand, we know what innovation has brought about. We live in the heart of the innovation hub of our nation and one of the great innovation centers of the world. And that is of enormous pride to all of us, and the technologies that are born, I think, almost every 5 minutes. So we are very proud of that. So we want that to continue to happen because we know what an innovation driver does for our national economy. The flip side of that is that we have questions, and the questions are very legitimate ones. I think that we have to, in Congress, and there is a huge interest in this issue in Congress, there always has been in terms of privacy. Now I would put a slash next to the word privacy and use the word tracking. There are some early bills that have been introduced in the Congress. I'm on the committee that will shape legislation, conduct the hearings, and send whatever we shape not only to the full Energy and Commerce Committee in the House, but to the full House of Representatives. So I'm very pleased that I get to wear that hat in representing you, and I think that tonight will be very instructive, both to me and hopefully to all of us. So I'm very glad that Facebook is here because they have, they're providing, helping to provide a platform to put out more information, and I welcome that, and I'm grateful to them for doing that. You know, it used to be pretty straightforward to keep personal information private. I don't live in those days and times anymore, and neither do you. But we have to shape our own destiny on this. And I was asked earlier today in an interview, what exactly will legislation look like? And I said, we haven't really begun. We have to listen. We have to know where really the soft spots or the areas that the American people, through consumer advocates and others, what they would advise us. We know that we do not want to stifle innovation or new technologies, so we're going to have to strike a balance between all of that. And we know that companies are in business to do business, to earn dollars, to turn a profit. But we also know that it's essential, at least in my view, that there is a public interest in what we do, and that we have a responsibility to consumers in our country as well. And I've always represented those views, and I'm proud to. I think it's being on the right side of angels, so to speak. But you're my constituents, and you know that those are my views. But as it's also said, this is complicated. This is complicated. So I look forward to reading out the questions. I want to welcome the special guests that are here, both those that are sitting on either side of me and everyone that's here in the audience. And my thanks to the City of Palo Alto for once again being so generous. And I see that the mayor is here, Sid Espinoza. Sid, thank you for your hospitality and the graciousness of the city staff for allowing us to do this here. I think it's the perfect place to be, right in the heart of Palo Alto. So let us begin. Let us begin. I have a note here from my staff. Boy, if I didn't have them, I'd really be in trouble, right? I think one of the most important places for anyone to serve is on a school board. And we are delighted to welcome Camille Townsend, who is the vice chair of the Palo Alto Unified School District. Where is Camille? Right here, right in the front row. There you are. And Nancy Shepard. Nancy, thank you. The council person from who one of us are in her seat this evening. No. I guess I'm in Sid's seat, and each one of you are in a seat that Nancy is probably sat in. Thank you to each one of you for your public service, and I'm proud to have you as my partners in representing this outstanding community. So are we going to go directly to questions, or did you want, each one of you want to make kind of an opening statement? Sure. Larry, would you like to go first?
Yeah, hi.
And thank you.
Thank you.
Get close to the microphone so everyone can hear you.
I'm so shy.
I don't want them to miss a word.
I'm so shy around mics. First of all, it's a great honor to be here with both Congresswoman Eshoo and also Joe Sullivan, who I've worked with quite a bit over the last couple of years. And I admire the challenge that the Congresswoman has, knowing that her constituents and the nation comes first, even though she does represent many of the companies that are involved in some of this issues. If not represent, they are in her district. So I understand that the pressure there, and I admire the way in which you're able to walk that line and walk it very well. I have been, let me talk just a couple little slides. But the purpose of this slide is to demonstrate that this is not new. My grandparents, I'm sure, worried about the jitterbug, and I know my parents worried about what happened on the rest of that slide. In fact, I might have been in that scene at Berkeley. I guarantee you I was not in the LSD slide, and I don't think I ever went to an Elvis Presley concert. But I do know that all of those symbols of my generation, when I was young, represented things that were very frightening to my parents' generation. And somehow, my generation managed to produce Bill Clinton and George W. Bush, so we must have done something right and something wrong. I won't say which is which. But the fact of the matter is, we really were able to come through and thrive. And I have absolute confidence that the current generation, the Facebook generation, is going to do just as well, probably even better. I've been working in online safety now for 15 years. And when we started with online safety, all we worried about was porn and predators. And then eventually we started thinking about how people are mistreating or treating themselves and others And that led to an understanding of cyberbullying. Nikki? We have now evolved into what my partner Ann Collier and I called Online Safety 3.0, where we really need to base it on what's real, not what's imagined. We need to be flexible and layered. One size does not fit all. Not every child, not every person is of equal risk in every situation. We need to be respectful of youth agency. This is so important. I'm so happy to see we have young leaders here in the audience. If we can't acknowledge the fact that young people have a clue, often more of a clue than we do, then we're not only failing them, we're failing ourselves. We need to be positive. This is not about safety from bad things. It's safety for good things. When I talk about going to Paris, I don't talk about the fact that Paris has some areas that are a little bit sleazy. I talk about the wonderful sights and sounds of Paris. I feel the same way about Facebook, about Twitter, even about Apple, even though I'm a little angry at them at the moment. We also need to be comprehensive. We need to incorporate safety, security, but most of all, digital citizenship, because it's really how people evolve as citizens that are going to make them safe going forward. And also, when we talk about citizens, everybody loves to talk about digital citizenship, as in, children, you shall behave. Look up citizen in the dictionary. The first definition of citizen is a free person. It is also about rights, and I'm ashamed to say that there are only 2 countries in the world that have not ratified the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. One of them is Somalia, the other one's the United States, so please take that to Congress with you. So we'll talk about safety, and really I'm going to go through this quickly. It's physical safety, it's psychological safety, it's keeping a good reputation, it's maintaining your privacy, and it's security. And they're all wrapped up together. So as we approach this, we really need to be thinking about all of those aspects. Now, a lot of people have been talking about this whole iPhone issue. And I have a column out in the Mercury News coming out on Monday. I had something else in the Palo Alto Daily yesterday about it, and I have a front page article in the Huffington Post about it, because I'm very upset about it. And what upsets me more is not so much that it happened, but the way in which Apple is basically saying it didn't happen, but we're fixing it. Yesterday, Steve Jobs and Apple put out an announcement saying we're not even logging your location. We're logging the cell towers and Wi-Fi hotspots around you. That would be like saying we're not logging your trip to work. We're just logging every restaurant and store and gas station you drive by. It is the same thing. And if anybody doubts it, this is a very crude one, but if you go to my website, larrysworld.com, or the Huffington Post, you'll see the entire map. 10 days ago, I took a bus trip from Boston to Boston to New York. My entire route was plotted by my iPhone. And when you go to the area, if you zoomed in on that dot at the bottom, you can see all the neighborhoods in New York City that I visited. Do you know the address? No. But you know where I was. And people have a right to privacy. Maybe I was doing business in Boston and New York, and I don't want my competitors to know I was there. There are lots of reasons, both perfectly legitimate and maybe not so legitimate, that we would want to hide our location, but we have a right to do that. The cops, they've always had access to a proper legal order. But all somebody had to do is find my phone, steal my phone, or maybe be a roommate and have access to it, and my location was there for them to look at. So I don't care what Apple said. I have a map to prove that they were, logging the locations near me. So another big week, PlayStation. You know, all of us are very conscious about security. We are careful with our passwords, hopefully. We use good security software, hopefully. We do all the right things. But what happened in PlayStation is a little bit like walking down the street and having something fall on you from the sky. All these people were doing was using a service. It isn't their fault that their usernames, their passwords, their email addresses, their street addresses, possibly their credit cards, and even the challenge questions like, what was the name of your pet when you were young, or what kind of car did you drive? Even the challenge questions that all the websites ask were pilfered, possibly by a hacker. That means that they're not only at risk on the PlayStation network, they're at risk in every other online service that they use in every bank. And all people did was have the bad judgment to be a customer of Sony PlayStation. 77 million of them. And I'm not knocking the PlayStation. I have one. It's a great product. But what can we do to make sure that these companies are protecting our privacy and our security? Car companies. You know, we all know that when it comes to auto safety, that it's the responsibility of the car companies to take good cars, to put in airbags and stuff, and et cetera. It's the responsibility of government to pass laws, to protect us, to have good roads, and to make sure they're enforcing the traffic laws. It's our responsibility to drive safe, to fasten our seatbelts, and to know when to pull over. And then there's that other guy. And all we can do about the other guy is try to stay out of their way, because you can't really control the guy behind you that may slam into you. But we can do defensive driving, and that's how we handle ourselves on the road. When we get online, who are we going to call? Is it the government that's going to protect us? Is it the company that's going to protect us? Is it the other guy, the cyber bully that we're interacting with? Is it the bad guys that we need to somehow? Or is it ourselves? And I can test it's a combination of all of those. Every one of those people, entities, plays a role. The government can't totally regulate everything, but it has to look over things. The companies, they can't control everything the users do, but they have to provide the tools and the resources and the education to make sure the users are doing as best as they can. The other guy, all we can do is get out of their way and try to minimize their impact. And of course, ourselves, we can make sure that we're using privacy settings, we can understand the tools, and we can use our own best practices. Speaking of companies, I was at a company last week. I know Joe and Anna, Nikki were there as well. And there were two guys. I took this picture. I took this picture because I wanted to prove that these two guys are actually in cahoots. There's actually something going on between Facebook and the president. But, you know, the interesting thing about the guy over there, Zuckerberg, I think the guy on the right, you know, I'm pretty sure he was born in America. I'm almost positive. But I do want to look at his college transcripts, because rumor has it that he was up to some mischief when he was at Harvard. And so I think we need to look into it. By the way, what these two guys have in common is that the guy on the left works in the West Wing, and we know a lot about the other guy thanks to the creator of the West Wing. So there's actually a bond between them. All right, moving along. Everything that we talk about safety, security, privacy, it's an old story. Privacy issues have been around forever. Safety issues have been around forever. Bullying has been around forever. That's an old story. But the net changes the equation. It's persistent. It's searchable. It can be copied from place to place and pasted. It can have high potential visibility. It can have invisible audiences, so you don't really know who's watching. And it can be the blurring of public and private. And this, by the way, is all contributed by Dana Boyd, who's a researcher at Microsoft. And also disinhibition. Sometimes online we forget the fact that the person on the other side of that screen is actually a person. Just like sometimes when we drive our car, we think we're surrounded by 3,000 pounds of steel, or in my case, my Prius, 1,800 pounds of steel. Well, there's still a human being in the other car, and we have a tendency to forget it in the car and online. So, one quick thing, and I think I'm going to move on because I know we got other things. A lot of people worry about what's happened to children on the internet as a result of potential sexual molestations. The reality is, if you look at the blue line shows that sexual molestation of children, or sexual abuse of children, has declined by 58% from 1992 to 2008. There is a lot of myths out there. There's a myth that we need to worry about predators. Of course we need to worry about predators. I know Facebook has programs about it. I know Congress has issues about it. But that's really not where most of our kids are at risk. Most of our kids are at risk by things that they do and things that their peers do. And that's really what we need to do. And we need to realize that you can put a fence around a swimming pool, but if you want to teach a kid to be safe around water, you teach them how to swim. And finally, we can put filters, and I know we have filters in the Palo Alto schools, but the best filter isn't the one that runs on the device, it's the one that runs between the child's ears. Because our goal as educators, our goal as legislators, our goal as industry people, our goal as parents is to equip our young people so that they have the critical thinking skills that they need, that they can use not just on the internet, not just when it comes to protecting their privacy and their safety, but in life in general. When they get in the car, when they go on a date, when they get in the voting booth, when they get that credit card. And if all goes well, as has happened in my family, our kids are going to turn 18, they're going to go off, we're going to lose control, and we better hope that we did something right the first 18 years, because ultimately it's up to them to run their own lives. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Anna and Joe, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Larry. I don't know if the presentation that you just made is in print at the table that people can
What is in
take?
print is not that, but is a guide called A Parent's Guide to Facebook, which is a detailed, and I'm not going to speak about this because we got Joe here, but a detailed guide on all the ways you can control your privacy and safety on Facebook, probably more than the Facebook people even want you to know, but there's plenty there. No, Nikki's read it, and I think you'll find it's extremely comprehensive, and there's an online version that's always up to date. This is pretty up to date.
That's wonderful. Well, I would encourage everyone to take a copy of it before you leave, and because I think it's a highly instructive presentation.
Thank you,
and
Linda.
the material. I think this should be presented to members of Congress, actually, and I think maybe I'll take it to the Internet
I respond to
Caucus.
all subpoenas.
Yes, no, you won't be subpoenaed for that, but I think maybe at the Internet Caucus,
Yeah,
Larry,
absolutely.
it would be
Love to.
an appropriate place for you to come and make the presentation to members. Now I'd like to call on Joe Sullivan. Thank him again for participating in this. Joe is the Chief Security Officer of Facebook, and I know that there are lots of questions that people want to ask of you, but I invite you to make some opening comments, and then we'll go directly to the questions that people have posed. And if there are more, my staff's going to bring them up, right? Right, okay, thank you. Welcome, Joe, thank you.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman Eshoo. It's a real pleasure for me to be here, both as an employee at Facebook, a local company, and as a parent of three kids who go to school in Palo Alto and a resident of this community. If I have really two objectives today in this conversation, it is to help parents and teens have conversations about online safety. It's something that we think about every day, is how can we do more to help promote that dialogue. As a parent, I think about safety in a lot of different contexts with my kids, and I know that it's not a single conversation. It's a long time dialogue that starts, and I love Larry's automobile analogy, the idea that it is a tool that has great use, but that has harm if used the wrong way, and we start teaching our kids about automobiles when they're old enough to crawl out onto the sidewalk. We start talking about it, and we have a different message when they're 2 than we have when they're 14, than we have when they're 16. And we need to be teaching all along the way, and the internet's the same, and it really is the same thing. So that's my primary objective in the slides that I'm going to walk through, is to enable that conversation at different points in time, and also to talk about when bad things happen. How do you as a parent respond? We know how we react when we see our kid run out into the street to chase that ball, but how do we react when our teenager comes to us and says, I'm really uncomfortable about something that someone said about me on Facebook, or did you know that I have a Facebook account? How do you respond to those situations? But so let me jump in to the presentation a little bit. Is anyone here familiar with Facebook, have a Facebook account? Okay, so I won't go into the details of what Facebook is, but you're not alone in using Facebook. Hundreds of millions of people all over the world, and almost every country in the world, use Facebook. And the reason you use Facebook is to connect with people and to share and to have conversations. From a safety and security standpoint, we really believe that you can, as a parent, use Facebook as a way to have that safety conversation with your teenager. It's something that you have in common if you both use Facebook. And it's Trustee had a study recently that showed that over 80% of the parents and teens who both use Facebook are Facebook friends. I think it's a great way to start that conversation, is to be Facebook friends. It's certainly a less invasive parental approach than insisting on collecting the password, which is also an approach that some parents take. My job at Facebook is to help build trust and promote an environment where people want to communicate and feel safe communicating. I think that safety is something that a lot of people, when you think about it, it's something that you don't always think about overtly. You think about it in the back of your mind. Like when you're walking in certain neighborhoods, you feel like on the back of your neck you get that warning tingle. And sometimes online you've got to have that warning tingle too. And so how do we build that in? I think that at Facebook we've actually been building that in from day one. If you think about Facebook, there's actually something that we do differently than most websites. On Facebook, my name is Joe Sullivan, and my profile photo is my face. And the people I interact with are my family members and my friends. And that's very different from, Larry talked about the internet in the 1990s. It was more like I was JS123, and if you interacted with me, that's who you thought you didn't know who you were interacting with, and you acted a certain way. But when Mark Zuckerberg created Facebook, he made that decision on day one. It's going to be real names interacting with real people, and we spend an unbelievable amount of resources searching for, finding, and removing accounts of people who try and use fake identities. And from a technological standpoint, it's a good thing that those people stand out like sore thumbs in our environment, because you just look different when you show up with the yellow avatar and JS123 as your name. So aside from that real name culture, we also have some really robust reporting mechanisms. If you go on Facebook, you should be able to, if you see, our goal is if you see something, you should be able to report it very quickly. The idea is that we would have and what I think we do have, is the largest and most robust neighborhood watch association in the world. If you're driving down the street in Palo Alto and you see one of those neighborhood watch signs, and then 5 minutes later you see a behavior that you'd like to report, you're gonna try and remember what number was I supposed to call. We don't want that to be the case on Facebook. We want you to be able to report it immediately, right there, and get it to the right person at the right time. But lately we've gone beyond trying to get those reports. We're also looking at how can we start that conversation about safety. So here's a case study. A friend of mine recently posted a photo of me when I was in 8th grade, and that was not a time in my life that I necessarily wanted to share with all of my friends today. And so when that photo showed up on Facebook, say I saw that photo of me in 8th grade and decided maybe I don't want my friends to know about my visit to the Trinity Unknown Soldier. And so I could press the report button on that page. And so this is the way the dialogue is right now. I can say, yes, this photo is about me, and well, it's not harassing or bullying right there, unless maybe there's some words underneath it that say something offensive. But say I don't even like that. So if we continue on, you'll see in the way websites have always worked in the past, you basically just reported it to the company and asked them to do something and step in. But Facebook is a social environment where I think the first option should be for you to reach out to your friend who posted that photo of you. So we've tried to make it really easy. So in this instance, this is our new social reporting feature where we can send I can say, hey, Adam, take that photo down. I'm not comfortable with that up right now. That starts a conversation. I think that if I report Adam to Facebook and Facebook removes the photo, has Adam internalized the impact of his posting that photo? Not as much as if I go through this flow and he gets the message from me. So that's something we've launched this year and that we've been testing in a lot of different contexts, and we're just getting some amazing results back. We announced this program at the White House Anti-Bullying Summit just last month, and I think it's a step in the right direction in terms of promoting that dialogue of digital citizenship. You can see we also then give the option, do I want to block Adam from being able to interact with me or tag me or even see me or my account on Facebook? So we want to give the person who's in that problem situation the options to deal with the situation the same way we would with a schoolyard situation. Option one is talk to the person working it out. Option two is go to an authority or a family member. If we go on, you can also see what if
actually in the audience here, Stanford grad who works here in Palo Alto for Facebook, handling those situations that do get escalated where people can't work it out on their own.
So can I ask a question?
Sure.
Just go back to the previous slide, where it says, hi, this person is bothering me online, I'm not sure how to respond, can you please help? Are you the one that receives that and then helps? I mean, who's listening to that? Who is where?
Yeah.
And how soon can you respond to it?
I'll respond for James since I have the
Okay.
microphone. But so there's, as a person who experiences something bad, we want to give you options. So if you just want to report it to us anonymously and not have anyone know that you reported it, you can do that. And people like James are there and responding. And our goal on anything related to teen abuse or hate speech or things like that is to try and address those within 24 hours. If you do, though, want to, instead of reporting it to Facebook, because something might not be a violation of our terms, like that photo of me, if James were to look at that by itself, is that a violation of Facebook's rules to post a photo of me walking down the steps at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier? It's not, unless you know about me and maybe something that, maybe I had said something in the office that was one of my most embarrassing moments when I tripped on those steps at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, and then right afterwards someone else posts that on Facebook. If you have that social context of the friends, so many bullying situations we've found don't necessarily rise to the level of something that's obvious to a third party. But so our goal is to have all those different options. Do you want us to take it down, or us to look at it and evaluate it against our terms? Or do you want to ask the person who posted it to take it down? Or do you want to send it to your parents or a family member or a friend to ask for advice on how to deal with the situation? So that's the way this process is designed now.
All right, well, no wonder we say it's complicated. All right.
Yeah, these are complicated
Larry
situations.
and Joe, thank you, and I hope the audience has drawn from their comments what I did. I mean, I've already learned, but we have many questions that have been prepared, and I think that, and I'm not surprised, that the members of the Student Advisory Board of the 14th Congressional District came well prepared. The first one is from Tom Reedy. How do users on Facebook or other sites like it know that they're safe from outside predators? How safe is your information, and how prevalent are sex offenders online? Now, Larry, you touched on the...
I've done a lot of work on that. Okay, so there's a common number that floats around, which is that 1 out of 5 teenagers has received an unwanted sexual solicitation. And that number was published in 2000. You can walk out their door, and there are children and there are teenagers in their environment. If you're worried about predators, you need to worry about people you know. You need to worry about wherever they are. They could be teachers, they could be coaches, they could be clergy, they could be police officers, they could even be a member of Congress, as we found out a few years ago. You need to be aware of the fact that they tend to be functioning in the community, not online. So the probability of any of you actually being harmed by a sexual predator is extremely low, probably analogous to being hit by lightning. Having said that, that doesn't mean they're not out there. So if you watch To Catch a Predator, which was on TV for years, or if you look at the police reports about sting operations, you'll find that there are many cases where police officers are posing as teenagers, and men are, or in some cases women, but usually men, are interacting with them. But that's different than a contact between a predator and a teenager. There's a lot of cops that have been approached by predators. There are very few teenagers that have, in terms of actually consummating something wrong. So, you know, there's certain basic rules. You don't get together with somebody you meet online unless you know them in the real world. If you don't follow that rule, you bring a posse with you. Make sure you got a bunch of friends. I like the cheerleading squad and the football team are a good start. But the reality is that the probability is that if you're going to be harmed, it's going to happen in the real world. And the harm that we tend to have online is typically reputation issues, where you say something that's going to affect your reputation, bullying, self-harm, looking at stuff such as cutting and other forms of self-harm. Predators really are a very, very small part. When it happens, it's tragic. It has happened. It's not impossible. Just as we get on an airplane, we know about what to do in case the plane goes down. So you need to know what to do about predators, but fortunately, it's very rare.
And people can and should expect the websites that they use to build features in to try and prevent that type of stuff. And so, for example, at Facebook, we take those risks really seriously and have built a bunch of mechanisms into the site that most people don't think about, in the same way that a lot of the structural integrity of a vehicle, you don't think about how it's designed to help you in the case of a crash. So, for example, when teenagers use Facebook, their status updates, the setting is not going to be to everyone on the internet. If a teenager has an account on Facebook, an adult who is not friends or in their network can't send them a private message. If you send a friend request to a minor, if I sent Larry a friend request, I can put a little private message next to it and say, hey, Larry, remember we were on that panel together, let's be Facebook friends. But if I send a friend request to a minor who's in the audience here, I can't put a private message next to it. Instead of my private message, there's a little note there that says, don't become friends with people you don't know in real life. So that's like a number of technical mechanisms that we built into the way that Facebook works to address those risks. We also do a bunch of automated screening behind the scenes, so that if someone comes on the site and decides to send a bunch of friend requests to minors, that's going to get flagged. Or if, when I send friend requests, the percentage that get accepted and the pattern in which I send them is very different from someone who's a stalker. And so we're working behind the scenes to try and build those mechanisms in. And I think you can expect that and should expect that of any service that you give your business to.
I think it's fair to say that the few cases of predators we know about, almost all of them took place in chat rooms, and very few of them took place on Facebook that I'm aware of. Joe, you may know more than I do.
I think that's fair to say.
It's an important point to make. These are both about Facebook, so I'm going to bring them together from Chloe Blanchard and Shannon Galvin. Some concerns I have about Facebook include the fact that I can't seem to change some of the settings that send me emails, so I still receive unwanted Facebook emails, even though I've attempted to fix the settings repeatedly. Also, I'm concerned that Facebook uses all of my documents and pictures without my knowledge. And from Shannon Galvin, what steps will Facebook be making in the future to ensure user privacy? Are there any changes to privacy settings in the coming future that we should know about? So I guess, Joe, you want to take these?
Sure. I think those are good questions. Our belief at Facebook is that when you share something on Facebook, that's your information, and it's your information to share with your friends. It's not our information, and we don't take your information and give it to advertisers. We don't sell your information to anyone. There are a lot of common myths about that in the advertising context in particular. If there are settings that aren't working appropriately, we definitely want to get that feedback, and so maybe I can even follow up on that after this session with the person who asked the question. What we've tried to do is build privacy settings that address every single concern that a person might have and give that control. When we think about privacy, because we're a communication platform, we think about control. And so the idea is always, if you're going to put something on Facebook, we want you to understand exactly and have control over exactly how it is shared with your friends. If you want to share the way you share on Twitter and share it with everyone on the internet, we want you to be able to do that. If you want to share it only with one person, we want you to be able to do that too.
This is a fascinating question. It's from Julia Highmark. She's concerned with the relationship between Facebook and education and schools. What is the line for what is or isn't acceptable for a student to post online? And when does it become appropriate or even acceptable for a school or an institute to interfere? It's a fabulous question.
I actually did an article about that. In fact, I interviewed Camille. I did an article about that a couple of years ago for Credible in the Classroom. And the fundamental issue that most of the attorneys told me is it has to do with a nexus. So, it's Saturday night. Billy and Sammy create a website called SusieIsASlut.com. Susie shows up on campus on Monday, and suddenly she's being harassed, she's being embarrassed, kids are making fun of her, et cetera, et cetera. Even though the activity took place off campus on a Saturday night, the fact that it's affecting Susie when she gets to school, interfering with her ability to get an education, means the school has a right, and some would argue an obligation, to intervene. It's called Nexus. And if you go to safekids.com, which is one of my websites, you'll find in the right-hand column, there's a link to that article where we talk to all the attorneys, and almost every attorney, except for the ACLU lawyer, agreed with this theory. And there's plenty of case law to back it up. But, as with all law, there are different interpretations. I don't know what's going on in Palo Alto around this right now. But there's no question that there's precedent that the schools do have responsibility.
We've received so many questions from educators about what's the right way to use Facebook with my students and what's the wrong way to interact with my students on Facebook. So many so that we just rolled out a new safety center, and one of the things that we're making available on it is literally a 20-page single-space document for teachers and educators that was prepared by independent third parties, looking at that and basically going through all the different scenarios that are good scenarios for teachers, bad scenarios for teachers. And that's going to be a downloadable PDF in our safety center for educators in the next week or two.
But do you go to school board members to work with them? This is all online, and I know that, and I have a full appreciation for what is online. But I do think that in the human experience, there's very little that takes the place of our being together, looking at each other, talking to each other. I don't think we can lose that. It's too valuable. So does Facebook work with school boards? Larry, have you gone and made any presentations to PTAs, or do they still have PTAs? Or am I dating myself?
Yeah. Last
Okay,
week
good.
I spoke.
Makes me feel good. All right.
Yeah, so recently I did a presentation to 400 middle school students, and to me that was like the most impactful. I was fortunate enough to meet the president last week and be on, been on television and done lots of other things, but the most impactful thing for me of the last couple of months was standing in front of 400 middle school students and listening to their questions. I took more notes in that dialogue and really took back some impressions that if you're trying to build safety into Facebook, you need to have those experiences. Last fall we announced we have a partnership with the National PTA Association to try and make sure that we get that feedback, and we're pretty much in constant dialogue with teachers on
Well, we have a school board member here nodding, so I wanted to know about that.
I also speak to a lot of school assemblies, and I actually give a presentation about Facebook privacy. And it's interesting that the kids think they know a lot about Facebook privacy, and they know it up to a point, but there's a point to which they don't understand the granular, customizable features. And so providing that kind of one-to-one or that group education, I think is very valuable, and kids and adults both seem to appreciate it.
This one is from Sirthi Ramaswamy. And Sirthi has directed this, I think, to me. I'd like the Congresswoman to talk specifically about internet privacy and how that relates to colleges and jobs in the future. I know a lot of teenagers underestimate the power of the internet in this area. Well, I don't think any one of us, of course, when we're younger, first of all, we think that we're going to live forever. and that there just aren't any consequences to anything that we do. I mean, it's just the broadest, freest view of the future, and that comes with age. What I can't help but think of is that today there are probably more documented things that are documented that then end up becoming consequential for someone down the road. So those of us that grew up without these technologies, I guess, had a lot more privacy, really a lot more privacy, because for the most part, it was the spoken word or the whispered word about someone. So I think I guess my answer is, watch what you're doing. I remember working with someone long before I was ever elected to public office, and he was. And I said, what's the best advice you would give to someone that's in office? And his response to me was, don't say or do anything unless you can picture it above the fold in bold letters. Well, that's kind of an antiquated model, but I think that you get the message. I think that you have to be you really have to be on your toes. So as you're having fun and you're communicating and you're signing on as friends and you have that many more friends, whatever it is that what you want in your college file? Is that what you want a potential employer to read or see about you? And I'm not just talking about a bad picture, because I think there are very few of us that like any pictures of ourselves, myself included. I don't think I've ever seen a good one of me. At least that's what I think. So, you know, you have to heighten your awareness, and it's not okay to play dumb. It just isn't. If you're going to use these technologies, then you have to know that there's a responsibility that comes with it. And so I guess that's the best way for me to answer your question. I hope I have. And you said that I know a lot of teenagers underestimate the power of the internet in this area. I guess we all do, but we shouldn't. But we should. We should be very pragmatic and realistic about this. You know, I mean, obviously, you're writing your own book. You're sending out your own pictures. You're saying things about yourselves, and you make that judgment. You want it above the fold, in my language, then that's what you have to, I think that's what you need to be responsible for. If you're old enough to be on and using this stuff, then you have to exercise some responsibility. This is from Tyler Finn. Companies are currently tracking individuals' online activities through cookies. These cookies have gotten so advanced that I could, for example, buy a rather fetching bow tie at ralphlauren.com and then have advertisements for all sorts of bow ties 10 seconds later when I check sports scores. Or in a slightly different use of an internet company's knowledge, I could get an email from my tennis coach about a lesson, and the sidebar on my Gmail account will suddenly advertise summer tennis camps in paradise. My question is not whether internet corporations will be allowed to track our online habits, because they already have, but what limits will be put on the use of that information. I think that this is a question that needs to be asked in a congressional hearing. Yeah. So thank you, Tyler Finn, for asking it today, and who would like to go at it?
Well, I certainly would. One thing I
think we both would.
I want to make a distinction between the ad you're seeing in Gmail, because that's contextual advertising. So what Gmail does is that if you write me an email and say, Larry, I want to go to Hawaii, there's very likely to be an ad on the right side of the screen that's about Hawaii or about travel. And that's contextual. It's right there on the site. The other one that you're talking about is tracking cookies, where you go to a site and it puts out a cookie, and then you go to another site and suddenly you're seeing a related ad. And you gave a good example of the bow ties. And it's no coincidence that we often see ads that are relevant to us. This is pro and con. Some people argue that it's a good thing because it means that the ads we see are relevant, and so we're going to be more likely to care about them. Personally, I would much rather read about travel and sports than I would about Viagra and all the other things I watch. But if I watch the CBS Evening News, I'm stuck with that because all they know is the demographics. and they assume that people watching it need Lipitor and Viagra. Well, you could argue there's something positive about tracking. The other thing you can argue about tracking in its defense is that it's a way that we can provide free content, because these ads are much more valuable, and that's why there are so many news organizations that are able to have free content. The downside, of course, is that up until now we felt totally powerless about it. It's about two things. It's about transparency and control, the same things that Joe was talking about. The good news is that the new browsers, all of the new browsers, will have tools that will allow you not to basically do not track, but essentially opt out of tracking if the companies are responsible enough to do what you're asking them to do. So when it comes to the legitimate companies, users will have the choice. They will be able to opt out of tracking. On the other hand, it may mean that they have to start paying for some of the content that people who are seeing relevant ads may be getting for free. So it's a give and take, but I think it's important that we understand that transparency and control are the fundamental issues. And if I were in Congress, that is what I would insist on. And I would think about whether this ought to be voluntary or mandatory. Right now, the Federal Trade Commission is talking voluntary, but they're hinting that maybe it should be mandatory. And I think that's up to you and your colleagues.
I've come to learn that goodwill is not a policy. Joe?
Maybe just a word on how we think about advertising at Facebook. And like Larry, I think of advertising and tracking on the line in two contexts. There's really like he said, the contextual advertising, meaning when you're on a particular website and the ads on that website are based on the information you've provided in interacting with that website. And then there is the tracking, where information that's been collected about you as you've navigated around the internet is aggregated and then used all together to build a profile on you, so that wherever you go, the next ad will be quote unquote relevant. At Facebook, we are entirely on the what we call in first party side, meaning we only do that contextual advertising. We don't build a profile of you and serve ads or share information about with you so that ads are offered up across the internet. The only ads that we have are the ads that are on Facebook, and those ads, when an advertiser buys those ads, they don't actually get your name or information. What they do is, Nike can say, we want to show this ad to parents of girls who play soccer in Palo Alto, and then that ad will show up for me, but Nike doesn't know anything about me. And so in that way, we've stayed out of that tracking business, and we've stayed out of selling your information, but have been able to have advertising in a way that allows us to build a business and build a website.
So it's a blind form of advertising, so to speak.
That's the way we've built it, exactly.
Yeah. And so no one is tracked.
That's right.
Larry, I like your idea. The two things that you brought it down to, transparency and control. We have a lot of questions. I'm going to go as fast as I can, because I really would like to have everyone. These are great questions. This is from Alice Ho. Is it Ho? My questions are: how can students be more protected from spam messages which link to malicious sites received on Facebook from friends' accounts that have been hacked? Overall on the internet, how can students be aware of sites and links with malicious content to prevent them from clicking on them in the first place? Who wants to take that? Let's try. I know this is heavy-duty stuff, but let's try and keep it as limber as possible, so everyone can have their questions answered.
I'll let Joe handle the Facebook part. But in general, number one, use good security software. Number two, don't click on any link unless you're absolutely sure that it's taking you to where you think you're going. So if it comes from your bank, go to your bank. Type in Bank of America or Chase.com. Just be very cautious and realize that what comes in email may not be what it seems. And I just don't click on links. I go right to the site directly, and that way I know I'm getting to the right spot.
I think that's good advice.
As stated, this is from Rajni Desai. As stated in the September 2008 issue of the Wall Street Journal, quote, 10% of admissions officers acknowledged looking at social networking sites to evaluate applicants. In regard to Facebook, what security and privacy settings beside the basic ones are guaranteed to the applying student so that information can't be solicited or seen by colleges? That's a a great question.
I-
They're
So,
all great
yeah,
questions.
the way I would think about it is there's two ways that people are going to get information about you on Facebook. One is they're going to go look at your profile, and so what you should do is look at your profile from the outside. And in our privacy center, we actually have features that you can enter like a friend's name or someone else to see how your profile looks to the outside. So or ask someone you know to go look at your Facebook profile and look over their shoulder. So you need to be aware of what you have done in the past. Second thing is look at your settings so that you make sure that you understand how what you post tomorrow will show up. And then the third thing is there are businesses and companies that do try and send subpoenas to Facebook to get information about you. There's actually a really good federal law in that regard that says that we can't turn over content of your account to any civil litigant or party that issues a subpoena except for law enforcement with a search warrant. So that's a really high standard. I actually have a team of people that all they do is say no to these data requests in divorce cases and workers' compensation cases and disability cases, all kinds of situations like that. They would love to have access to your Facebook account, and we say no, and thankfully there's a federal law that allows us to say no.
And also be careful who your friends are. Don't accept friend requests from people you don't know, because they could be a college admissions officer.
Right.
And you mentioned law enforcement, and I want to acknowledge the presence and the wonderful, wonderful work of the Palo Alto Police Department. Thank you very, very much. Thank you. There are two questions here, both from the same person. I think it's Michaela Presti. She says it's fabulous. You have all these tools, but 90% of kids won't report because they're afraid of losing privileges or retaliation. So how do you get them to use the tools that you're talking about? And her other question is, does Facebook have any ideas about how to get parents educated? Kids are damaging their reputations, and their parents have no idea they're on a social networking site, and just because a parent is a friend doesn't mean they're looking at a child's page. Wow, sounds like people are living under the same roof and no one knows what the other one is doing. Huh? Talk about bad networking, but at any rate, that's a quick observation.
Well, first of all, we wrote a parent's guide to Facebook for that reason. And second of all, I can't speak about what happens when you make a report to Facebook, but I can tell you that parents don't overreact. One of the most important things you can do is don't blame your kids if they come to you with a problem, but help work them through it. And also, if you're going to be a friend of your kid, don't pester them and put things on their page. Be a lurker. Don't be a poster. You don't want to say, oh, how cute or how stupid. Don't write on their page, but just be calm about things and try not to overreact, because all you'll do is drive them underground. The worst thing that they could do is leave Facebook and go to one of the sleazy, dangerous sites. At least at Facebook, you've got a lot of best practices, so you don't want to drive them underground. That's the most important advice I give parents.
Right.
Well,
Right.
Well, you know, there's an old saying that you don't have to take out a license in order to become a parent. So I think that you know, friends of you're referring to parents obviously that you know. Say something to them. Maybe have some of them over at your house and put on your own whatever. Invite Larry or someone to come. But you know, responsibility has to be operational in this, and common sense and pragmatism. I think we're learning that as we're going through this. I mean, the technologies are and can be somewhat complicated sometime, not only in terms of the explanation, but what tools to use and how to use them. But we have to exercise our own responsibilities, and I don't think there's anything that really takes the place of that. This is from Scott Taylor, and Scott Taylor testified at my committee in 2006, and he says that Senators Kerry and McCain have introduced a balanced and innovative bill for omnibus federal legislation. I know you've been a long supporter of privacy since I testified in front of you in 2006. Do you see this bill as a path forward for balancing the tensions using information robustly to drive the economy, yet respecting the rights of individuals? I don't know the legislation in depth. Scott, where are you? Where is Scott? Right there. So I'm going to have to get back to you after we do some kind of an analysis of it. I know the committee that I'm on will be the committee that will start the process in the House. And it's always important to look to see what others have already written, although you know that the House and the Senate don't always see eye to eye. I always think that, especially in legislation in areas such as this, you learn from the views of others. But we have to have hearings on this, and perhaps bring you back and others that will testify and answer the questions that members have, many of which are the kinds of questions that you all are asking this evening of the witnesses, so that we understand the breadth and the depth of what the issue is, what the values are and the tensions of values that there are in the that are contained in the issue, and that that we're not doing something ad hoc based on anecdotal happenings, but rather shaping a policy that's going to be good and workable for people in the entire country. I mean, here in the city council chambers, they make decisions for the people of Palo Alto. When we make a decision, we're making a decision for the entire country. So I think that there has to be the balance between understanding what innovation really does produce for our country, and that it needs to be robust. We want to continue that. We want to protect the ingredients in that, but also, as you said, you know, I've always been a supporter of privacy. I think that these are rights of the American people, so that's a balancing act, and you have the Constitution mixed into it, right? I mean, that's what our Constitution provides for privacy. I remember many years ago someone saying to me that was in public office, why is it that the press writes about me and they don't write about you? And for those of you that are thinking, what do we do, and parents and the young people are asking, and I remember responding and saying, my private life is private and my public life is public. So we're going to have to balance these things out. So we will take a long, hard look, obviously, at what Senators Kerry and McCain have put together. Thank you for bringing it up. This is from Emily Riles to Joe Sullivan. Oh, she knows exactly what she wants to ask it of to Joe. I was recently very frustrated with Facebook when my brother's Facebook, who passed away last year, was memorialized by an anonymous person. I had access to my brother's account and was going to rememorialize it after saving some of his private messages. However, I was prevented from doing this because the account was frozen by someone I didn't know. When I tried to explain my problem to Facebook, they claimed the account could not be restored and they couldn't tell me who had memorialized it. Can you explain to me the process of memorialization? Boy, this is the span of life and even into death. Isn't that something? Can you explain to me the process of memorialization and why you will not open deceased members' accounts for their family? Wow.
It's a really tough question, and it's.
Have you ever had a question like that?
Yeah. No, it's an important question, and there have been some recent articles talking about, and there are actually companies that exist now to deal with your digital legacy, and it's become I've met founders of at least 2 companies who want to help people preserve their digital legacy, and I had a friend, a really good friend, that I'd worked with for years, and who was taken by cancer, and the experience that we had with his Facebook profile after he died was astonishing, as it became a real memorial to him and to a testament to his life, as a lot of us posted, and his wife used the account momentarily to give the details on what was going on with their young children, and how arrangements were being made. But so when someone dies, how you deal with their estate is a very sensitive issue that we want to try and work with families to defer to the perspective of the family on. But we also want to protect the privacy. Fundamentally, the first and most important thing from our standpoint is to protect the privacy of the person whose account it was. And we don't necessarily know if they wanted their private messages with other people to be made available. And those are really sensitive issues. So from the beginning, our default had always been that we wouldn't make that information available, and that we would default towards memorialization as soon as we were aware that the person was deceased. And so what memorialization does is it basically, the account remains there, but it can't be used by someone else. And fundamentally, that goes back to that real identity.
Didn't you say that someone else had used it, though?
Well, someone else so someone must have let us know, and it's hard for me to talk to a specific case. But when we get a report from a family member that, that someone has been deceased, we want to take that account into memorial status, so that no one else will use it and take the identity of, or like I heard a situation where someone got a message and it showed up in their inbox from someone that they knew was deceased. It was from a family member trying to communicate with them, but it was really shocking to the person who received that message that, wait a minute, that I just went to the funeral, and to see that message show up. So there are a lot of sensitive things there, and so our goal is to take the account into memorialization, or if the family wants us to take the account offline altogether, we do that.
Thank you. This is from Enka, and I'm not sure what her last name is. Kangampin, I think, and if I've mispronounced it, forgive me. Another question for Joe Sullivan. Facebook has done a lot to ensure privacy. However, the addition of check-ins seems pretty risky and dangerous to someone's privacy. Isn't that kind of a step back?
Should I jump right in? Okay.
Yeah, it's directed to you.
Check-ins is what we call Facebook Places, which is when you go to a location, you can check in at that location. So last night I was playing ice hockey down in San Jose, and I checked in with and tagged a couple of my friends who are on our ice hockey team and said we're at the rink. But when I did that, what I was doing is I was sharing content in the same way that I could have written a status update saying, hey, I'm at the hockey rink with my friends. And we treat that the same way, meaning the visibility of that information is limited. And so we looked at, and I mentioned earlier how the privacy settings for a minor, we built the same types of controls into places for minors if they checked in, only their friends would see it. And so if you're at that location with me, you would see it, or if you were my friend, you would see it, but not beyond that. And so it's like every other aspect of Facebook. Before you use it, you should think about the controls and what you intend to do and how you want to share.
Good. Did you want to add anything?
Well, you don't have to use it. I mean, I love Facebook Places. I use it all the time, but there are times when I don't use it. In fact, very quickly, I was at a Google party the same night that there was a KCBS party, and I realized I had said, I'm at Google, and I said, oh my God, I just admitted that I'm going to the wrong party, and I hightailed it up to KCBS to make sure I was covered. There are times when you can make a mistake, so just use it with caution, just as you would a telephone or any other communication system.
This is from Lewis. I think it's Shupak. Companies like Google install cookies without authorization. As a consumer, I do not have an understanding of their infiltration in my private life. How to track and report this? Google is a respected company, but not all companies have the same motivation. I'm not so sure what the question is here, though.
You can delete cookies, you can control them, you need to learn how to use the tools in your browser. And that's about, I don't know what Google does with cookies, but you have control, they're on your computer, and you need to learn how to take them off.
This is from Anch Siri Parapich. I think I butchered your name, and I apologize. I know what it feels like because I know how many ways my name has been spelled and mispronounced. What steps has Facebook taken to govern the privacy controls of its myriad of applications and widgets. I think we've touched on this in many different ways, but you may want to say something, Joe.
I think that what that question is getting at is applications in particular. So when you use Facebook proper, you're sharing information just with your friends, but when you use an application through Facebook, which is one of the powerful things about Facebook, is that you can play hundreds of different games with your friends, you can make photo albums with your friends, you can do hundreds of other things with other websites. And so when we use the word application, it could be a website or it could be like that type of plugin. So when I go to Yelp, I might want to get it sorted by the recommendations by my friends, and that might be valuable. What we do when we think about any third party, someone other than Facebook that you say, well, first off, we don't share your information unless you say, I want to use Farmville, and I'm okay with my friends seeing that I'm using Farmville. Then we will allow Zynga, the company that makes Farmville, to have access to a certain amount of information. But before we share that information, we'll say to you, we're going to we have this pop-up that says these are the fields that Zynga has requested access to for purposes of that application. We also make them sign a contract saying when they get that information, they'll only use it for purposes of that game experience. So they can't just take your information and turn around and sell it. We also make sure that they have a privacy policy and a bunch of other things like that so that you understand, oh, I'm giving my information to Zynga for purposes of this game, and they have different rules, and I know them.
This is something that I've wondered about for some time, and it's from Denise Terry. How does Facebook plan to better authenticate a person's identity, including age and real name? As parents, we know many teens are sneaking onto Facebook despite the legal age requirement of 13. Sometimes they use face names, fake photos, they use fake names, fake photos, and lie about their age. How can Facebook help with this? I mean, you can say that it's 13, but how do you, I mean, if someone lies about it, or they look older, how do you deal with that? I mean, how,
Right.
Yeah, it's a great question.
And it's a challenge to prevent people from lying sometimes. That said, there are things that we can do, and we kind of look at it from a few different perspectives. One is we want to engage parents. We want parents to know that we have that age limit of 13.
So do you contact the parent?
We've set up these really easy mechanisms. So if a parent discovers that their under 13 child is on Facebook, they can do two things really easily. One is they can report it to us and we can just shut down the account. Two, we actually have a mechanism that the parent of an under 13 child can request all the information from the account that the child posted.
Now, can a friend of the child report it to you and have it?
Yes, although we will scrutinize each one of those. So James and the team will look at those reports because sometimes 14-year-olds will try and claim that their 14-year-old friend is under 13 to see if they can take their account offline or something like that. So if it's a parent, we'll take the account off and we'll share the information in the account with the parent. If it's a friend, we'll look at it and try and make an independent evaluation.
I just want to know, a couple of years ago, I served on a task force called the Internet Safety Technology Task Force that was organized by 49 of the 50 attorneys general. We worked out of the Harvard Berkman Center. We spent a year studying the issue of age verification technology. Many companies were out there trying to sell the idea that they had a magic bullet that could somehow validate age, but it turns out that it's not that easy to do, that it's extremely hard to do, because you wind up against some serious privacy laws, you wind up against some very serious unintended consequences, and at the end of the day, we recommended that we not adopt technology age verification, even though we recognize that it's a challenge. And I know Facebook has had to struggle with it, and it's true. There are many under 13 years olds that are using Facebook, and parents need to be aware of that, and also need to make sure that if your child is under 13 and using Facebook, which they shouldn't, but if they are, they have maximum privacy settings turned on, and you are the parent is a friend of them, and you're using every possible means to make sure they're using it safely. But having said that, you shouldn't be encouraging them to lie. So it's an interesting conundrum as to what a parent ought to do.
This is from Max Lipscomb. There's been significant talk about Facebook's ability to separate users by their social network, school, company, etc. How much does this affect what you see on Facebook? Are there any blocks between users?
So our goal is to give users the control over those blocks. Um, if I put information on Facebook, I decide who sees it. So I join the Facebook employee network so that when I put something on Facebook, the other employees can see it. Or I can decide when I publish something, and when I put up a photo album with my family, I will publish it to the Sullivan family group so that my extended family can see those photos, but no one else. Or I will adjust my privacy settings if I put up, photos when our child was born. I might want an even narrower set of people. So our goal is to create those mechanisms to give people control, so you can see the information that your friends and other people have decided you can see.
We're almost to 7:30, and I'd like to ask a question. I guess another one. Larry and Joe, how widespread is tracking? How do you address
A
that?
couple of things you should know. That if you have a cell phone in your pocket, someone or some machine knows where you are at all times. Some machine. And the reason why that was put in there actually is for public safety, because a long time ago the 911 folks decided it was a good idea that we'd be able to know where people are. If they had an emergency, we could locate
I was
them
part
through
of
their
that
cell phone.
legislation,
So it was
E911.
a very well-intended thing, but the reality is that whether it's the phone company or something knows where you are. Now we're getting into situations where there is a disconnection between the phone maker and the phone company. So for example, I have an Android phone. It's made by HTC, the software is from Google, and the service is from Sprint. And so in the old days, Sprint would have complete control of my experience, and I could either trust or not trust Sprint. Now I have to worry about Google. I don't have too much to worry about HTC. I also have to worry about all of the apps that are on this phone. And there are thousands, hundreds of thousands of apps.
Sure.
And by the way, I have an iPhone. I both camps. And between the two, there's probably 1 million apps out there. And so the fact is that you've got a lot of different people who theoretically could track you. And again, it gets down to transparency and control. The rules on both Android and Google is that every application that tracks your location has to disclose that. We have a tendency to ignore those things. We just say yes, 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 and suddenly we may have our information available to other people. So again, I think one of the things, Congresswoman Eshoo, that you and your colleagues can do is to make sure that these rules are really transparent and really clear and not written so you have to be both a lawyer and an engineer to understand them. It's bad enough you have to be a lawyer. Now you've got to be both a lawyer and an engineer. And so we really need more transparency and clearer situations. But the reality is that if you have a phone, you can be tracked. There are some privacy laws in place to protect us, but as we saw just last week from Apple, there are some loopholes and there are the possibilities of an insecure system getting into the wrong hands.
Joe?
I think that covers it really well.
All right, well, I think we've come to the time where we thank everyone, not only for coming, but for your really, I think, outstanding participation in the form of your questions. I mean, they're really thought-provoking. And I've learned a great deal because you asked excellent questions and heard the responses from two real experts here. As I see it, there are they were just handed to me too. 1, 2, not that we had the time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 questions that we didn't get to. And what I'm going to do is to make sure that both of our guests, both Joe and Larry, have a crack at them and that they get to answer you. And we'll make sure that they do. Not that I don't trust that they wouldn't, but I'm a real stickler about getting back to people. So Larry and Joe, I know that you will. And there was a question that was submitted to me on an entirely different subject, and it's on the subject of gerrymandering, which I guess we could spend a whole nother evening on, but I will get back to the constituent, Gary Lindgren. I will answer you directly on that, but I didn't think it was part of the subject matter this evening. So, again, I really want to thank Larry and Joe, because I think you've been really enlightening. This is an area that I think is perplexing, as I think it's Michaela raised some of the issues that she did about parents and children. The young people said, well, what do we do and how do we do this? And I talked about responsibility. There are a whole series of complicated things that are part of something that we're all embracing and use and enjoy. And I think the more we talk about it, the more we discuss it, the more dialogue we have, the more we deepen our understanding of not only how the technology works so that it's not menacing or mysterious, especially for those of us that weren't born into the information age as it was, next gen, that the better off we are. I'm thinking that maybe that we think of doing a series of these and take different parts of what the internet is, the social networking aspects of it, maybe some specific workshops relative to parents. I don't know. We'll have to put our heads together. And for those that are listening in, you can call in and let us know at our office or email me. But suffice it to say that as one person here who has to deal with the policy, this has been enlightening and very, very helpful to me. And with that, I'd like to just present these congressional certificates of appreciation and special recognition both to Joe Sullivan and to Larry Magid for your outstanding work that you do for people in our community, and to Nikki Jackson Kowalko for what you've done. And again, my thanks not only to my staff, but to all the Palo Alto city staff, to the elected officials that came and listened, and to the Student Advisory Board, to the young people that are here. Bravo to you. For those of you that may not know what they do, they study policies that are vexing. I don't tell them what I want them to do. They are the ones that come up with what the policy is, and they work for an entire year with my staff to not only research it, but then to make recommendations to me. So even though some of them are not old enough to vote, every year the student advisory boards throughout the congressional district, their voices are heard in the Congress, and they are the source of not only inspiration to me, but also superb legislative ideas that have been hammered into legislation, and I'm really proud of the work that they do. So mothers, fathers, constituents, young constituents, Larry and Joe, and again to those that were filming and allowed us to get into people's homes this evening, thank you very, very much. Thank you, everyone, and good night.